Jai Om Vishnupad Paramam Sakarabraj Kacharya Sri Divine Grace Radhe Charananda Srila Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki Anand Koti Vaishnava Ki ISKCON founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Samaveta Bhakta Vrinda Ki Gaur Premanand all glories to thee, all glories to thee, all glories to thee, all glories to C.C. Guru, all glories to Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada this evening, a little bit each in his own way and with his own mouth and realization. I will be brief and just introduce all of you to our main speaker, His Holiness Bhaktisvarupa Damodara Maharaj. Namam Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Satarine Jaya Shri Krishna Whenever I, as a relatively young disciple of Srila Prabhupada, remember him, the first vision in my own mind is that here is a soul absolutely surrendered to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Throughout my life, whenever there are difficult situations and when it is not so easy to find my way, I'm looking or I'm praying a prayer which Srila Prabhupada wrote when he arrived in America. And this prayer, which has been appraised by the Vaishnava community all over the world as the prayer of a fully surrendered soul, Srila Prabhupada expresses his helplessness. He says, "My Lord, I do not know why you have brought me here to America, but you must certainly have your purpose." Then he addresses what he observes the Americans are. He says, the populace here is totally overwhelmed by the lower modes of tamas and rajas. How will they like your katha, the talk about you? And then he expresses his great faith. But if they are willing to hear the sound vibration about your glories, will purify them. Then a little later, he expresses that he wishes to become someone who brings this powerful message, this message of purification into the hearts of his audience. He says, "My Lord, please make me dance, make me dance, make me dance as you like." And he signs his prayer at the end, signed the most the insignificant beggar is he, Bhaktivedanta Swami. So this is, when I should speak something about my spiritual master, this is a prayer or a vision which comes to mind. He is a great personality, very dear Mukunda Preshta to Lord Krishna, who has surrendered himself to be his instrument, and who is now being moved by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This is something which comes very much to my mind when I hear of my own spiritual master. He has the higher connection. He is not an individual who acts on his own, but he is moved and is made to speak by the Supreme Lord. Another thing which you might find a little humorous, and I'm not sure if I can express this before my older brother in good words, is a very personal approach to Srila Prabhupada. I like one particular pastime about Srila Prabhupada very much. A pastime which speaks to my own conditioned nature and my lack of surrender to him. As a disciple at the time of initiation is becoming surrendered to his spiritual master, and there will be challenges to this surrender when his ego wakes up and wants to go also against his spiritual master. It is not always easy for each disciple to control this material tendency which keeps him in the material world. And I'm a very good example of a person who is thinking still of surrendering more and more to Srila Prabhupada. Once Srila Prabhupada made a morning walk in New York in the Central Park. This year I had the opportunity to visit the Central Park and see where this pastime takes place, because I like it very much. So as he was going on the morning walk with his cane and warm cloth, he would spot the little frozen puddles of water which were there. He would go out of his way, take his cane and break the ice in these frozen, ice-covered little, I hope it's a good English word, puddles of water. He would do this a few times. His disciples were noticing it, and obviously they didn't want to ask him about it because it seemed to be so indecent. Why are you breaking the ice? But they, one asked in Chicago, where Srila Prabhupada had been, if Prabhupada on a morning walk displayed some extraordinary behavior. And first, the devotee of Chicago didn't know what to do with the question, but then he answered, yes, I don't know if it's extraordinary, maybe there was a deeper meaning behind it, but Srila Prabhupada went out of his way to break the ice on the puddles of water. Acha, said the New York devotee, he also did it here. So he decided to ask Prabhupada for the reason. Very politely and very humbly, he said, Srila Prabhupada, you have broken the ice on the puddles of water. Some reasons behind this? Prabhupada very firmly answered, it is my duty. This, of course, now was the question. Why is it the duty of a spiritual master to break puddles of ice in New York and Chicago? What is... It was a question in the minds of the devotees. And Srila Prabhupada explained. it is the duty of the spiritual master to help his disciple to overcome his ego. And he gave a very nice explanation. He said, originally the heart is full of love for Krishna. But when we enter the material world, this pristine liquid of love of Krishna becomes adulterated by the foreign atmosphere and becomes changed. Just like when we enter this world, our love of Krishna becomes lust to enjoy the material world. And this lust is directly under the control of the self-centered ego who wants to enjoy and not give enjoyment. There are different forms of this lust. Not every lust is physically oriented, and name, fame and glory is a little bit more subtle, for instance. So the spiritual master can, his duty is to help the disciple overcome this frozen state of the heart. He breaks the ice of the ego. And not all disciples want it. They protect the heart against the stick of the guru. They do not like the guru to inflict discipline. They want sometimes to inflict discipline on the guru. Do it like this, do it like that, say like this. So Srila Prabhupada, fortunately, is an icebreaker. Fortunately for us, for me, very poor disciple, very unsurrendered. When you read Srila Prabhupada's books, when you see his example, when you try to follow his life's teaching, you will quickly notice that in his guiding you, he brings you to the point where your ego is confronted. For each spiritual master wishes that the ice becomes the original liquid again, that the ego or the enjoyment spirit is turned into giving enjoyment to Lord Krishna. In summary, Srila Prabhupada is, in my own humble eyes, the very surrendered soul to Shri Krishna, who is connected with his divine mission to elevate the conditioned souls in this world. And Srila Prabhupada is an icebreaker. Leads us to surrender to Lord Krishna by his example, which he is so good in. I wanted to read it, but you can all find it with the arrival prayers and by his teachings and guidance. So with this, we wish to turn to our exalted guest, His Holiness Bhaktisvarupa Damodara Maharaj, who really, if you read the dialogues which are available, it's printed in German language, Leben kommt von Leben, life comes from life. You know how very dear he is to Srila Prabhupada, and how it is the same personality who walked with Srila Prabhupada on the beach and asked him these very, very important questions. And he is now next to us, he is now before us, and we will now hear with our utmost concentration. Our heart will be filled with surrendering, listening, and I wish that we all hear now very patiently. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Srila Bhaktisvarupa Damodara Maharaj ki jai, Go Premanandi Hare Bol.
So I have to speak now?
You must enlighten us.
No, it's done.
You wish me, okay.
It is illegal.
Illegal.
ज्ञानतिमिरान्धस्य ज्ञानञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। नमो ॐ विष्णुपदाय कृष्णपृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्त स्वामिनिति नामिने। नमस्ते सरस्वती देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पश्यत देशतारिणे। हे कृष्ण करुणा सिंधु दीनबंधु जगतपते गोपेश गोपिकान्त राधाकान्त नमोस्तुते। तप्त कांचन गौरांगी राधे वृंदावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणाम में हरे प्रिय। वाञ्छाकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्येव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासदि गौर भक्तवृंद। हरे कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे। जय गुरु महाराज श्री प्रभुपाद की जय। जय जगन्नाथ बलदेव सुभद्रा महारानी की जय। जय श्री श्री गौरी निताई की जय। जय हिज हॉलीनेस सचिनंदन महाराज की जय। भक्त गौर भक्त वैष्णव वृंद की जय। गौर प्रभावरंदे हरे कृष्णा। So it's a very good fortune for me to be here in this beautiful country called Switzerland, and also this Zurich, the beautiful temple here, and also among all the Vaishnavas and the Vaishnavis and Maharaj. To speak about Prabhupada, if I should begin with this statement that Prabhupada was sent by Lord Krishna to this world so that he can enlighten all the sincere souls in this planet. So he should be regarded as very fortunate as a part of his mission. So Srimad Bhagavatam says that Nasta Prayasa Rudreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevam Bhagavati Uttam Sloke Bhakti Bhavati Nastaki. So this is very important. Nasta Prayasa Avadreshu. Avadra means all the inauspicious things in this material life, material world. We see that every minute, every second is you turn your eyes in all directions to find there's so many unfortunate things happening throughout the world, especially in our modern time, the terrorist activities and uncertainties and people in great anxiety and so much so many problems that we are facing every moment. So abhadra, so the symptom of this material world is abhadra, means full of inauspicious symptoms. But Bhagavad says, all these inauspicious symptoms, nasta praya sarvadreshu nityam bhagavata sevaya. All these inauspicious, all these unwanted symptoms in this material world will be completely destroyed. Nasta praya, nasta means destroyed. But the process is nityam bhagavata sevaya. So nityam means by constantly, eternally serving. Now in this case, it should say the spiritual master. Bhagavat, got two Bhagavatas, the book Bhagavata, the Srimad Bhagavatam, and the person Bhagavata. The person Bhagavata who is speaking this evening is speaking about Srila Prabhupada. So by serving the spiritual master, so all these inauspicious symptoms, all these unfortunate things in this material world will be completely destroyed. So, and when you read about Prabhupada's, let's say, how he met his spiritual master, Srila Prabhupada, and later on how he planned to execute the order that he received from Srila Prabhupada. That is a very, I think, enlivening. So in this connection, when I was in Bombay, the Mataji Srimati Maharaji is next door to our temple in Juhu. So, fortunately, I used to go to our house. That was it must be in the 80s. Around that time, because she lives next door, and especially when I arranged this conference in 1986, there was Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's 500th anniversary festivity. Then I arranged this congress called First World Congress for the Synthesis of Science and the Religion. It was held in Bombay. Before that, I used to go to take advice from Mataji and also So, since it is next door, and she also invited us for prasadam, and she prepares wonderful Gujarati preparations, items, and she has a beautiful temple and house, and she has so many, Prabhupada's pastimes. So she explains to us. Actually, I used to go myself with one of my assistants, generally, to our house. And then she narrates about, so Prabhupada was sitting here doing the kirtan and speaking Srimad Bhagavatam for so many days, and she was speaking like this, like that. And so we got this, very fortunate, got to hear directly from her about what Prabhupada was doing before he was preparing to go to the United States. Then she also asked us, you also do the chant here, because this is why your Guru Maharaj was doing the chanting and the speaking Srimad Bhagavatam and explaining to me and to other people. Mataji Maharaji was speaking like that. And so she told so much about how Prabhupada was so determined in his plan to make that journey to the United States. Although she discouraged him that Swamiji, you are too old, don't go now. What do you do in America? Because you say you're going to go there and don't eat meat and don't drink alcohol and don't smoke, and who will follow? Nobody will follow. So you are too old, nobody will listen to you. Don't go. You're saying like that. But when Prabhupada came again and again and requested her for this, for the passage in to get a seat in that in that cargo ship. So ultimately, when she knew that Prabhupada was so determined to execute the order of his spiritual master, Bhaktisvarupa Prabhupada. And this is I think I should say that at least to me, this is the most impressive that the cultural, it has a deep cultural meaning as well as the spiritual, that the determination and the commitment that Prabhupada had is incomparable. That hearing all this, not only in the reading, but also hearing from the person that Prabhupada was directly dealing with. So I was very impressed with this principle. And then you read in the Bhagavad Gita commentary in the 2nd chapter, and in different parts of Srila Bhagavatam, Prabhupada's writing, and Prabhupada says that the life and the soul of the disciple is to actually follow the order of the spiritual master, 100%. So this was Prabhupada's total commitment, and this is a very impressive. So as a part of that in order to execute that, the order of the spiritual master and the commitment and the prayer, just like Maharaj was mentioning about it in the diary from Prabhupada, that his commitment and his prayer in order to execute the order of the spiritual master is the essence of Bhagavad culture. Because we belong to this parampara that the Brahma, Madhva, Gaudiya Sampradaya, the culture of this Sampradaya is the Bhakti culture, is this Bhagavad Seva. Nityam Bhagavad Sevaya. So eternally, Nityam is not just for 1 year, 10 years lifetime, but this is eternally. Nityam Bhagavad Sevaya. And the Prabhupada represents that. So this is that's why just thinking about that and having a little internal understanding about how Prabhupada dedicated his life, and after the last minute, I should say that unfortunately, I show, even up to the last minute, the last in his pastime here in this world, and since I started by the blessings of Krishna, and the Vaishnavas started singing Prabhupada, and at least that was in 1970, and in 1977, when he departed in November 14, 1977, and I saw that Prabhupada is a great commitment and to execute the orders of the spiritual master. But it is it cannot be expressed by words. But that always strikes me in my mind that whenever something comes bothering in my mind, always comes to my mind. How did Prabhupada was able to dedicate so strongly in order to execute the order of his spiritual master? So with that, by remembering that the inspiration comes, and so this is one thing that I just wanted to share with you, my feeling about Prabhupada in his service to his spiritual master's order. So far as my personal relationship with Srila Prabhupada is concerned, and also my remembering about him, is that I was not staying like a regular devotee, because I was a student. I was working outside. My connection with ISKCON is mostly when Prabhupada came from traveling around the world, came to Los Angeles. I go there when Prabhupada comes, but otherwise I never stayed in the temple. I was never a regular devotee like others, and so I was only I was under any temple president. I was directly with only with Prabhupada. So whenever Prabhupada comes from traveling around the world, especially in Los Angeles, then I go there, and then this dialogue. So that that created some kind of I don't know what should I say, that it is the so we had some kind of let's say I'm very free. I was very free to express to Srila Prabhupada. I didn't have any, if something comes in my mind, I didn't have any hesitation to just express it without without any reservation. Somehow I had that. I didn't express it because I was not regular devotee. I was like a guest. So this made me put it a little difference. And Prabhupada, in the regular dialogue and discussion, sometimes he was very humorous, and sometimes he was very serious, and sometimes he chastised me. And so these are some of the things that many of the things that Prabhupada stated in our dialogue. And now if I recall it, it will be sometimes it will be very difficult to express. But one thing that when I was in Vrindavan, that was when I was one of his assistants in his last days in Vrindavan. So the one night, it was just about a few days before his departure. So because my duty was to attend this Prabhupada from 9 o'clock in the night up to about 3 o'clock in the morning. So we had five persons. We were with 24 hours. Let's say. So my slot was from 9 p.m. up to 3 o'clock in the morning. So this was to attend Srila Prabhupada. At that time, Prabhupada was lying on bed, and then he wants to turn his side in the bed. We have to help him. And sometimes Prabhupada says, cover me with his cloth, and so like that, so you have to help him. And my slot is 9 to 12, but Prabhupada usually is awake at around midnight. At midnight, then he speaks. But he spoke at a time, mostly in Bengali. And because my Bengali, at least I know a little, some Bengali, but I was not 100% knowing, but I should say around 80 to 90% I can understand. But mostly at the time, Prabhupada was speaking Bengali language. And he remembered that he was remembering calling our morning walks and morning walk conversations. And Prabhupada, he was saying that, so I took you to all these morning walks just because I wanted to train you in Krishna consciousness. And so then Prabhupada said, are you convinced? Are you convinced that Krishna, Lord Krishna is the Supreme Godhead, the personality of Godhead? Are you convinced? This was just before a few days before his departure. So I wasn't sure how to answer. But then I was remaining a little silent. And then I said, Prabhupada, only by your mercy, that if I can understand anything, it's only by your mercy. But he was very serious in the sense that he wanted to make sure that his disciples are fully committed to continue to carry that the teachings that he left, and he was extremely serious, very concerned about his disciples. And what I learned from there is that so therefore the disciples somehow or other always can stick to the teachings of the spiritual master and try to follow the instructions given by the spiritual master, and that is the strength that will carry the disciple, the person, the devotee, forward in the journey of devotional life. So, and also he was very concerned about the well-being of even the physical well-being of his followers. So whenever I went to see him, and say after some absence, Prabhupada's first question will be, how is your health? I also used to ask Prabhupada, Prabhupada, how is your health? When he comes, when I see him first time, Prabhupada says, you're looking weak or looking very good this time. I was freely expressing. But his first question will be, how is your health? And so one time, in the morning walk, in Los Angeles, it was in the winter time, and it was a little cold in walking the beach, and I just went to it with my the shirt and without any chadar, and so Prabhupada got very upset. Why do you come like that? To make us cold and suffer. And then one of the devotees, he had chadar as a sweater, so he was immediately giving me one sweater. Then Prabhupada was happy. So he was very concerned about the well-being, not only spiritual well-being, also physical well-being of his students. And so in this way, I was very impressed with Prabhupada's he's dealing with his disciples and also of the guests that so again I should speak a little bit about my connection with Prabhupada is mostly in this scientific preaching. The main connection to Prabhupada is a preaching works among the scholarly people around the world. And so he was extremely concerned that the modern world, the people are misled by the scientists. So his concern was that if the scientists are given some, let's say, some basic philosophical background of Krishna consciousness, if they can change, we can change their heart, at least to some degree, and it will do tremendous good for humanity. But he wrote me one letter, Prabhupada wrote me a letter saying that if I can convince one scientist in my lifetime, he said, one scientist, then your life is, your birth, your coming here in this world is completely successful. Because one earlier letter, Prabhupada wrote me a letter. But somehow I was working till 1976. I was thinking of how to join Prabhupada full time because I was working. So after finishing my PhD at California, then I worked at Emory University for some time. So my plan was, when will the time come that I can join Prabhupada? And I couldn't do it earlier because I had some obligations in other family matters and others. And although I had a very intense desire to join him, to follow him. Then when I was in Atlanta, in Georgia, that was from 74 to 76, I was working at Emory University. So after that, I decided that now the time has come that I should join Prabhupada full time. But what happened was that at that time, in 76, so just before that, I applied for this immigrant visa in the United States. And when you apply the immigrant visa, then at the time, if I leave the country, then I will lose that my application. So Prabhupada called me in 76 that I should come to the GBC meeting in 1976. Because we're going to discuss about science preaching and GBC meeting and also about Bhaktivedanta Institute formation. So this letter came, and then at the same time I was already applying this immigration visa. So that I wrote to Prabhupada that now if I leave this country and if I come for this GBC meeting, then I will lose this application. Then Prabhupada wrote me saying that well, if you have that problem, maybe we at least wait for some time and let's see what your immigration visa will be when it comes. Maybe at the time we'll discuss, or maybe even if you don't come to the GBC meeting this year, it could be all right. So I didn't go to the meeting. Later on, late 1976, the immigration visa came. That immigration was. Then I sent a letter to Prabhupada. Now, Prabhupada, my immigration visa is okay. So how should I proceed? Prabhupada sent me a letter of congratulations for getting immigration visa. Saying that this American visa and this immigration visa, they don't give it so easily, and so they only give it to qualified people. And that was, so after that, I decided that maybe I should give up my job now. The time has come. I have to contemplate that I have some family obligation. So I have made some arrangements. Because I come from my family background, I had certain responsibilities to. My uncle was not as right. I have already taken care of that part by making certain arrangement. I was trying to think that when I leave, and others, so that the family members don't take it otherwise. I had done my own duty in those 2-3 years. And so I was more or less free. That now I could, since I have done my duty, now I could plan to join Srila Prabhupada full time. So I came to join. So I left actually that 77, early 77, from Emma University. I came to join Prabhupada full time. To India. Prabhupada was in India at the time. But then 77, that became a very difficult year for all of us, 1977. But in the meantime, this preaching, the scientific preaching, this work that what Prabhupada found was becoming very, very intense. And later on, when Prabhupada became physically ill, that when the GBCs were called, and there was in 1977, around May, in the summertime, then in Vrindavan, this is in Vrindavan, that Prabhupada started speaking about his preaching, how to preach today among the scientists. So this became main focus, especially in Vrindavan when I was there. And so every day Prabhupada would speak how to organize this program. And so the idea of conference came there in Vrindavan, organizing conferences and then inviting many important people from the leaders of the society and get it together, have a regular dialogue. So this came almost like 2 months, 2-3 months in Vrindavan in the summertime. So this organizing conferences and inviting many important scholars and how to deal with them. So this became a regular dialogue. I was not alone. I was actually myself and the then Gurukul headmaster, Dr. Sharma. There was an elderly, the first Gurukul principal was Dr. Sharma from Agra. He had the Prabhupada was very friendly. He was a senior man. And so three of us discussed about this prison program. And Dr. Sharma was extremely, friendly to Prabhupada. Also, Prabhupada liked, because he's very elderly and he also has a lot of wisdom. So in the process of discussion, Prabhupada came with this plan that we should hold these together in these conferences, scholarly conferences throughout the world. So that became the main focus, at least with me in my service. So therefore this conference plan was crystallized in Vrindavan, and so then we were preparing some books, it's called the monographs, that what is life, what is matter, and that about 3 monographs we were preparing at that time. And so when I went from Vrindavan I was planning to go to the United States for some preparation for this conference. The conference was decided that they should be conducted in Vrindavan on this thing called Life Comes from Life, International Conference on Life Comes from Life. So this was Prabhupada's own plan. I had suggested one different topic, saying that we could call this as a Bhaktivedanta conference. But Prabhupada said, no, if you say Bhaktivedanta conference, then people may not take it very seriously. So call it as life comes from life. Scientists would be, they are intrigued with this life comes from life. So you hold it with this conference, this title. So this was the plan. And I'll tell you what happens when Prabhupada came back. See, at that time, Prabhupada was planning to come to the United States, but in a very difficult physical situation. He came up to London, and I was coming back from Boston. I was coming back on the way to Vrindavan. At some time, there was some uncertainty about the conference, because Prabhupada was coming to the West. And but then when I met him in London, in Bhaktivedanta Manor, it was 1977. There was in August 1977. So then Prabhupada, he was supposed to go to the United States, but then he said that now I want to go back to India. So Prabhupada returned from the manor, from Bhaktivedanta Manor, from London to Bombay. So during that preparation, time of preparation, then Prabhupada from Bombay, after a few days, then Prabhupada went to Vrindavan again. And I was running almost every day to organize that conference in Vrindavan. So I used to go to Agra and then to Delhi and inviting some scholars for the preparation. Because Prabhupada said, you do something before my departure. I want to see it. I want to see how we do it. So at the same time I was, for the first time at the conference that trying to arrange, and I used to go every day, and every day I would come and report to Prabhupada. I said, Prabhupada, I met such and such people today, and I was very enthusiastic, and I would like to come to this conference. So Prabhupada, every day he wanted to hear my report, and then when the conference gets very close, and at a time there were, this is already in October. The conference was organized in October 14, 15, 16. But this date is Friday, Saturday, Sunday, 14, 15, 16, October 14, and the Prabhupada will depart on November 14. So this date is always kind of strikes me as a very significant time scale. Then Prabhupada asked many of the senior devotees there in Vrindavan. He called them and said, please make sure that when the scholars come, they are received properly and given a nice place to stay. And the prasadam, always going to be a menu, conference menu, and so what are the items, and who are the volunteers, and I'm going to serve them. As a details Prabhupada was planning in this conference plan, and he was instructing many of the senior devotees at the time. I said, you please help this conference, you please help us out down there, because this conference is very important. And so everybody was preparing, and so when the date of conference came, then Prabhupada was calling me saying that I want to go to your conference, but you see, because of this physical situation, I cannot go there physically. But then there was a bust in this room. You take this bust, and you keep there on a table, and put it down, and that's right, this is as good as I'm there. So carry on to the conference. And so then every hour Prabhupada would call me in this room, and how is the conference going? How is it going? Who is speaking what? And he was very, very enthusiastic. Then at the end of after the conference, and the conference closed, then he wanted all the devotees who were speaking. At the time we had five of us, I think, Madhava, and Saraputta, and Gyanadas, and Brahmatrita, and so they're all scientists. And so we have five. All five were, and they were all dressed in civil dress in Vrindavan, in the conference. Because Prabhupada said you should dress, you should have this tie. So we're all dressed like that. And so at the end of the conference, Prabhupada called us, and what Prabhupada, when we went to Prabhupada's room, Tamal Krishna as the secretary, and since we all, Tamal Krishna said, Prabhupada, all our scientists are just like scientists. They are dressed suit and tie, and they are all here. And so we wanted to sit this near Prabhupada, near the bed. And Prabhupada said, no, you should sit on the chairs. So bring the chairs. Because we became all scientists. So then I requested, Prabhupada is fine, you can sit on the floor. But the Prabhupada, he didn't agree. So I thought you should sit on the chair. So he sat on the chair. So he was asking how the conference was, and he was so enthusiastic about it. And he was saying that we should hold this type of gathering conferences in every city of the world. And in this way, that all these important people will be able to have at least some connection with Krishna consciousness. So this, the Prabhupada, that way that he dealt with even in the disciples under certain circumstances, and also with the guests, that I think those are something that I think we could always remember. He was extremely respectful to the guests, and especially to many people who visited him. So in this way, what I learned from by remembering Prabhupada's dealing with people in the process of preaching is something that that could be very, very wonderful for all of us to imbibe that spirit. Oftentimes, in the common, let's say, instructions or dialogue, Prabhupada, you might have heard that Prabhupada speak very strongly that the rascals and but these are you can say very internal family instructions in a family circle considered. But when you meet, let's say, other people as guests, it's extremely respectful, extremely. So this we should understand this, because sometimes what is about just by reading from some let's say conversations or some printed matters, sometimes people can conclude certain things. But in the real life, the real preaching in culture, Prabhupada had a tremendous, let's say, cultural, let's say, this nobility, and very aristocratic and very highly respectful about dealing with others. This is what I observed from Prabhupada. When I took Professor Benford, Professor Benford is the physicist from the University of California, where I was doing my PhD. So Professor Benford, Gregory Benford, so he's still he's an astrophysicist, but at the same time he's a science fiction writer. He's very, very well known science fiction writer in the world today. So when I took him to Srila Prabhupada, the way that Prabhupada handled him, because this is in the garden. Los Angeles garden is a very popular place for bringing many of the scholars, and also many of the parents, the devotee parents, used to come and visit Prabhupada in this garden. And generally, when Prabhupada is there, I was there, always near Prabhupada to join the dialogue. So I took Benford, Mr. Benford. The way Prabhupada started was that you are a very well-known scientist, and you scientists, you spend your time and energy in studying. This Prabhupada picked a little grass, and it's this grass that you want to scientifically, analyze this grass and what are the molecules, why the color is like this, and so you can study all these things. You can write volumes and volumes and volumes of books on grass, on this piece of grass. And Prabhupada, you think that is a scientific knowledge, and what good is that science? What good is that knowledge? He was asking Professor Benford. And he said, well, the scientific knowledge is a different category of knowledge. It is very useful because the human mind is very inquisitive. And so to know why the grass is green, and why the fragrance is, why it's like that, and what are the components, it's a very wonderful thing. And so it's very useful. And Prabhupada changed what do you say? You say the scientific civilization is that from the pullow cart, now we go to motor car. So you say this is a scientific civilization. Then Prabhupada asking, but are you making any advancement in your, let's say, in your life's journey? So this way, he was trying to feel his what he has. This fellow has in his mind, just to get a little idea what this fellow is aiming at. Then Prabhupada turned and, do you believe in God? The next question was, do you believe in God? Then he said, no. Then the thing would be, not exactly, so I am skeptic. I'm skeptic. Then Prabhupada took that point. It's a very significant turning point. He's skeptic. But Prabhupada was very cool and very, very calm and very compassionate. And the way he looked, the scientist, he was listening and very carefully. Then he said, yes, you say you're skeptic. That means sometimes you think that there is God, and sometimes you think that there is no God. Then he said, yes. And that means you are doubtful. You are doubtful because your intelligence is not able to discriminate what is right and what is wrong at this stage. But you have some doubt. So, and Prabhupada said, this is a good sign. We have to be doubtful. So then conversation went on that very, maybe still in the science of self-realization, that conversation is there. With Professor Benford. So Professor Benford, so he has a tremendous respect. I just got a letter from him just a few days ago before I came here. Because he just wrote me saying that his mother, his wife passed away, and because I still have contact. He also came for Prabhupada Centennial Conference in Calcutta. He spoke about Prabhupada, and he still remembers. He also written something about Prabhupada in the science fiction. In his science fiction. The Sept wrote, this very high-sounding words, and it is there in the publication. But what I wanted to convey, the principle is that in dealing with especially people in the field of preaching, I think the style of showing respect, great respect, whether the other person is atheistic or theistic. So I think this is very important, that especially in dealing with guests, when the guest visits the temple, and in our preaching fronts. Personally, I feel that this is the process how to deal with guests and how to present Krishna consciousness among all passage people with respect, with feeling, and then trying to see what the person has in his mind, trying to know a little bit about him, and try to explain in terms of Krishna consciousness. And then what happened with Benford was, when after speaking like that, then the Sunday Arati is already coming, and so Prabhupada wanted to go in his room. It's after sitting in the garden. So that was actually a Sunday. It was also the marriage day. About what brothers got married that day. And what happened was just before entering into the room, one devotee brought this huge plate of Prabhupada's oval set that plate, and all these preparations, these beautiful preparations, and huge prasadam for Prabhupada. So the devotee was offering for the Prabhupada. And so what Prabhupada did, he took the whole plate and gave it to Benford. This is for you. this prasadam is for you. And he was amazed because he didn't know what was happening there. He never expected it. See, the beauty there is that Prabhupada, the guest, he was guest, he was just a regular scientist, and it's coming for the first time. And but just to please him and to also show the culture, the cultural part. So he was completely. This Professor Benford was looking this way, that way. So what happened was that that day the preparation, one of the preparations is this eggplant, this brinjal that they call eggplant. So that preparation was there, and Professor Benford had a special liking for that. So he took a lot of this time in the preparations, and then Prabhupada went. And also then he wanted to experience the kirtan, the arati is going on inside the temple. So Bento said, so when he was going on there, and he joined. I explained to him this art is like this, and then he also saw the dancing of the devotees. Los Angeles was very lively because Prabhupada is there and it's full of after having the darshan of the arati, then it was already around almost 7:38 around that, and he said he was thinking of heading to, but he was from Laguna Beach actually. He still lives in Laguna Beach, and so he said, I want to see the Swamiji again because I want to say goodbye. And so I said, Prabhupada is upstairs, and so let's go and meet him. Okay. So in the process of doing that, and you see Los Angeles, now the temple, now in Los Angeles is like this. When you enter the Prabhupada's room, that there is a hallway. In that hallway there are these radiators for for heating. And on that there are quite a few of this paper plates with the prasadam. And so Bedford found another plate with the eggplant. So he again had that plate. He completely finished that plate also. So after that, there is also a washroom there, and then we went upstairs. Then at this time, he was extremely respectful of Prabhupada. He's saying that Swamiji, you have done miracle, all these American young boys and girls. So they have given this wonderful knowledge, and you are guiding them in this way. So I'm extremely grateful that you have come here to this country, and this spiritual, this knowledge you are giving to all these young boys and girls. We are extremely grateful. And so he was very much appreciating about Prabhupada before he left the temple. So you can see that that Prabhupada's style of preaching. Not only that, there are other scholars that I occasionally take to Prabhupada, and always show like that. Someone will be. One time there was one Indian scientist I took. His name is Professor Tiwari. He's also from the university. He was a molecular biologist. But in his case was opposite. So he come from a Brahmin family from India, and so he was. So then Prabhupada asked him, do you read Bhagavad Gita? So Professor Tiwari answered that, yes, I read, but I don't read all the slokas. I read some slokas which I like, and there are some slokas which I don't like. Then Prabhupada said, you are a demon. I took Professor Tiwari, then he was, but of course since he come from India, so he has some cultural, that so he took it as a blessing from So, but generally in my experience of Prabhupada, so the way that he dealt with especially with guests and friends was extremely polite, as well as very concerned about their status. So in this way, it was very congenial type of atmosphere that he created. And personally, I feel that this is a very important part of in our preaching field, and this is very important. Actually, meeting with different people from different cultural backgrounds, and to keep a cool-headed approach. It's very important. So in this way, some of the elements that I remember in Prabhupada's his activities, it is extremely important to remember and try to apply it in our day-to-day work. So it's already past 9. So Maharaj, you want to add something else?
Maybe the devotees have some questions to Bhaktisvarupa Damodara Maharaj. I'm sorry.
Hare Krishna. Thank you very much, Maharaj, for giving us a picture of Srila Prabhupada, which you have personally experienced. Srila Prabhupada's great insistence to preach to the scientific community, and the way he did it, with great respect, to show us an example. I would like to ask the devotees if they do have any questions to Bhaktisvarupa Damodara Maharaj. If not, I do have a question. Maharaj, when you were coming to Srila Prabhupada and had this unique and also very personal exchange with Srila Prabhupada, how did you view him? You described him in relationship to this particular strand of preaching, Krishna consciousness, that is preaching to the scientist. Now, did Srila Prabhupada sometimes make to you a comment in private how he saw the other parts of his spreading with Krishna consciousness? The other parts of spreading Krishna consciousness. I'm trying to understand. Prabhupada he had his Western disciples to do it. Did he express sometimes something to you in a very personal way, maybe some hope for his Western disciples to understand certain things, maybe some little frustrations with us, people who did not come from a very high culture, a very sensitive culture. Did he sometimes mention to you, like in a private way, one-on-one, some perception which he had about his developing mission, which went through its ups and downs in the West?
Let's say...
I don't want to say Indian to Indian, disrespectful, but this personal... I could say that when Prabhupada went back to India and he came back, Prabhupada told me that he was not, what he thought was not happening. He's still in India. Mm-hmm. But stayed in India, it was very slow. It was too slow that when Prabhupada went back to India from the United States, and the response in India was he felt very, especially in Bengal. The Bengal younger generation, Prabhupada was expecting that they will come in a very much more enthusiastic manner. But Prabhupada was disappointed that it didn't happen in the earlier part of the mission. So he expressed this when Prabhupada returned to the United States.
but so far as the what is it, the internal expression for Prabhupada, in general, I would say that he had a tremendous hope that in the West, that the Western, let's say, Vaishnavas and the Vaishnavis taking extremely seriously. I think this was, I think, the greatest hope that Prabhupada felt that this will do the job of spreading Krishna consciousness worldwide. I think this was quite vivid when, one time there was a vast Puja celebration of Bhaktisvarupa Prabhupada in Los Angeles. So it must be either 1972 or 73. So at the time, Prabhupada, with tears in his eyes, and he was expressing that the tremendous appreciation about especially the Western disciples, that he said, I remember this, that you all represent my Guru Maharaj, Bhaktisvarupa Prabhupada, but he asked me to go to the West and spread his Krishna consciousness. So you are all representatives of my Guru Maharaj, with the tears in his eyes. And so by your tremendous sacrifice and your this wonderful dedication, so that the movement is spreading very quickly. So therefore, you are all my Guru Maharaj's representative. And this was stated. So Prabhupada was very happy that so he had a tremendous hope that so I think there was I think I should say a wonderful thing that and let's see, what else you asked?
I guess you have answered it.
So anybody has any question? Any other question?
You mentioned in California when you were studying that you were only going, your motivation was to see Prabhupada, and you weren't really regularly.
I was not regular
You weren't a
devotee.
full-time devotee. So full-time together with Prabhupada, or did Prabhupada actively encourage your studies, or somehow express an interest that you study?
Yeah, Prabhupada, one time, in the middle of my PhD, I requested Prabhupada that Prabhupada is very difficult for me to continue going to the Mangalarati and trying to study this is not very easy for me. So I'm losing my interest in my studies. So I want, can I stop this? There was already, I was right in the middle, and I asked this to Prabhupada. And Prabhupada said, no, you must finish your PhD. Because if you don't finish PhD, then when you go to preaching, nobody will listen to you. So, that was kind of, I was thinking like that day, because staying there at the university and doing all these studies and then trying to go on into devotional life was quite it was difficult. And then when Prabhupada said that, and also my professor, Professor Taft, is a very well-known physical chemist. Taft, he comes from a very noble family, as nobles in the family in the past. He was the president of the United States, and Taft is a very famous scientist. And his name is in the textbooks for Taft's equation in chemistry. If you study, some higher parts of chemistry, then his name is his equation. You have to study the structure, reactivity relationship. And so he, since he is a very prominent scientist, he doesn't come to the department all the time. He visits like once a week or once in 2 weeks, or so he never comes. And I was only his graduate student. So I had full freedom, and so I could go, and I also be absent for many days because he doesn't come. He's a graduate student. So that had brought, I think, many advantages and disadvantages. Advantages was that I was able to be with Prabhupada all the time at the time. And the disadvantage was that I didn't have anything to prepare for my thesis. Because I was a zero, because so I knew that if I continue like this, I will never get a degree. And then when Prabhupada said I must get it, then one summer I worked real hard. That one summer, that day and night, I was staying in the lab. Basically, I sleep in the lab, and then I go for a little prasadam to Lovely Beach temple. I just drive there for about half an hour and take a little prasad, and then come back, and I spend day and night in the lab for the summer, 3 months. And in 3 months, by Prabhupada's blessings, and I got all the results, and that was enough for my thesis. And so Prabhupada was very happy when I had that, and he said, you could work, and if you want to have a family, you can have a family, and then you try to help Krishna consciousness. That was the earlier plan, and later on it changed.